the biggest piece of advice is get the right people on your team and don't be afraid of doing that. And I think take the time in the beginning to strategize and hopefully move forward in a way where you can afford to financially invest in those people. For me, I have a wonderful business consultant, Kamyar Shah, and he's been really helpful with me as far as moving forward and giving me those golden nuggets and those pieces of advice to build right in the very beginning and the structure that I need to have in place to start things right.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Renee Rosales. And Renee came from, in her own words, hardworking family. Parents always had side gigs. And so in college, she had multiple jobs while earning a degree, including, I think, a painting business or something to do with painting at one point. Got a degree in education, worked in public education for a while, got married, had some kids, and got going doing some side gigs while she was raising the family. And I think it might have something to do with teaching school, or she can correct me where I'm wrong. And then with COVID, all the kids went online, decided to launch her own business, and she'll get into a little bit more as to what that is. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Renee.
Thank you so much, Devin. I'm so happy to be here. And I love what you're doing with the Inventive Journey. I think it's awesome for us to be able to share our experiences with one another and hopefully gain a lot of wisdom along the way. We all have a different journey, but we share a lot of the same struggles and challenges, and hopefully we can help each other share some of the same victories.
Absolutely. No. And I think that's great. Now, it's always fun to hear everybody's journeys and to help each other along the way. So now maybe to kick off, talking a little bit about your journey. So I gave the 30-second version, the high-level version, which doesn't, I'm sure, do any justice to it. So maybe with that, tell us a little bit how your journey got started with working in, coming up in a hardworking family, and how you did multiple jobs going through college.
Yeah, sure. Basically, my parents they're wonderful people. They both had full-time jobs throughout my childhood, but they always had a side hustle. They always had their own business that they did together. And I come from a history of creative people, and my parents were crafters. My father's a carpenter, and so they created home decor together, and they sold that to different individuals. It was before the internet, so they had little home groups that would come over, and I was a part of that. And it was always kind of like I never even thought about it. It was just something we did as a family. They recruited us to help them do things. I'm a painter, an artistic painter. And so that led into me developing a business called Artistic Accents when I was in college, just to kind of supplement. I was also waiting tables and getting my degree in English education with a concentration in art. And I enjoyed doing that. But I had a difficult time really dialing in exactly what I wanted to do, with the exception of I knew I wanted to help young people. And I saw education as being this huge benefit and an opportunity for kids that potentially didn't have this kind of resources I did growing up. Having a way out, or a way through some more of the challenges. It's like, we know that within education, and now the landscape is changing, but in the 80s and the 90s, you needed to have that degree to get the job and to make a way. And so I went into English education and I loved it, but I early on recognized that I had leadership qualities that other people didn't necessarily share. Like, I was always doing extra. I'm a high functioning ADHDer. Like, I have the energy of the Energizer Bunny. I always have done extra. And so I got a lot of ed tech experience, and that kind of launched me into online schools. And at the time, those were...
Dive in real quick on that. So because or I think jumped over part of the journey, which is, so you went to school, you got it, you worked at multiple jobs and doing those things while you're in college. You came out with an educational degree. Now, before you got into ed tech and online schools, I think you mentioned, but you can correct me where I'm wrong, that you worked as a, quote unquote, normal teacher in the educational system, or teaching kids to face. Is that right?
Yeah. So I started as an English teacher and I taught inner city Cleveland at a middle school. And I waited tables on the side and I still had my artistic accent thing going. So I was doing a lot of different things all at once. And I loved it. I love working with kids and I really love alternative education. That's kind of what my niche was. I've always had an easy time working with kids that other people may have found challenging or difficult to reach. That was kind of always an easy it's a point of excellence for me. I could just dive right in and find that connection, and making connections has never been a problem.
No, and I think that,
So,
sounds like plenty to keep you busy. And I think that, being a teacher is a full-time job, and then you add on a couple things. Now, one of the things that we hadn't talked before, but I thought was interesting. So just out of curiosity, what part of Cleveland were you in?
I grew up in Akron, actually, and then I moved to Little Italy in Cleveland. I don't know if you
Okay.
know where that's
So,
at.
and that's funny, just because I went to Case for my law degree as well as my MBA degree. I went to Case Western, so I actually lived in Little Italy as well. So it's always kind of funny to how small the world is. But yeah, so we lived in Little Italy for the whole time I was going to school, and so certainly familiar with that area as well.
Yeah, and I waited tables at Corbo's when the Golden Bowl when it was still there.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
that's always funny that how small the world can be. So won't focus on that, but just had to add there. Thought it was an interesting side note that we both had ties to Cleveland. It sounds like we're in the same area. So with
yeah.
that, so now you're saying, okay, I'm doing being a teacher, doing additional side hustles, trying to continue to do that. Now, how did you start to get into ed tech or to doing more online and kind of making that transition? Was that kind of just branching out from what you're doing as a teacher, or as a side hustle, or kind of how did you get into that?
It's kind of interesting because honestly, I had a vocal cord issues when I was in one my first 3-4 years of teaching, and I had to go through some vocal cord operations. And at the same time, I had met my husband, and he was going into his residency, and we relocated to Arizona. And so, and my voice wasn't still full throttle. I mean, I was in with a headset in my classroom because there was like 6 months where I could barely talk louder than a whisper, and I still pushed through. And we moved, and then I was looking for a job in Arizona, and I ended up. They didn't have an English teaching position open, but I found a job. They wanted me at Mountain View High School in Marana, which is near Tucson, and they put me in a computer lab. And like, I'm very high energy, so I happen to know the software system, and I developed a credit recovery program for the students there, and it was the first credit recovery program in Marana. And so after doing that, I went from having no kids in the class and just monitoring the lab to having 7 periods of the day. The class was completely full. And then the superintendent came to me and said, we're recognizing you as an emerging leader. We want you to build us a school without walls. And that's when really online high schools were first coming to fruition. So I partnered
what
with,
date was, or what year was this? Just curious, because certainly
yeah.
now as we've hit COVID, and now everybody has had to probably experience online schools to a degree, whether they were done well or not, it's a different question. But what year was this when you started to get into that?
So I moved, it was around 2000, between 2003, 2004, we had to write and get approval to have the school, get rights from the state for that. We went through the process, and the school doors were open by the spring of 2004. We had the first students enrolling. And then we moved to Flagstaff. My husband finished his residency, and we ended up moving to Flagstaff. So we partnered with Mesa Unified, which is the largest school district in Arizona. And they were the first public school district to have an online school program. So we used their curriculum, we shared students, and I went to the then director, Doug Bernard, it's now Jennifer Eccles, and I said, hey, can we do this again in Northern Arizona? So he said, sure, just find me the partners and we'll make it happen again. So we moved to Flagstaff. I started teaching at Flag High. I was teaching English. They said, you give me a job and I'll bring you an online school. And so that's what we did. And in 2005, I started another school. Then it was a program, and we made it the 16th school in Flagstaff in 2016.
No, and so it sounds like, you started all the way back early 2000s, and it's been a bit of an evolution that kind of, as you were teaching and being part of the school system, that you were continuing to be, develop that and implement things and be a lot of the point person. So now as you've kind of gone through that and you are continuing to go through that, how did your journey transition a bit to where you're at today? And I think you mentioned, correct me again where I'm wrong, that it started out a bit with kind of COVID and seeing your kids and others having to go online and do things and maybe it not done as well or something along that lines. And so how did you what prompted you to kind of go after the endeavor you're at today? And did you leave the teaching system? Are you still there? Is this a side hustle? Is this a full-time gig? Kind of clue us in as to the kind of how your journey leads you to where you're at today.
Oh, my husband and I did keep a side hustle. So when we moved to Flagstaff, we started in real estate. We started renting properties, buying properties, dipping into short-term and long-term rentals and Airbnb. And we've kept that going from the very beginning, from our first days in Flagstaff. But then at the same time, I'm building up a school, I'm having kids. And really, it was a combination of things, but COVID launched me into going into my own business. I ended up leaving FUSD in this last July to go full throttle with Theara, which is my new company. And in large part, that was due to my experience as a school administrator and as a mother. I have 5 kids, but one of my middle son is profoundly dyslexic. He was also born with a condition called childhood apraxia of speech. So he didn't really talk till he was almost 4. For someone that's life is full of words, that was really hard for me. And at the same time, I was pretty well versed in the world of special education, at least from an administrator standpoint. I was in IEP meetings and 504 meetings all the time. And I was able to see areas where there were like disconnections and places we could create bridges and opportunities for better collaboration between parents and schools. Also, I was in the thick of it with my own children trying to manage jobs. And I put together things that really worked for me at home in relationship to well living. And so in April, my school, Northern Arizona Distance Learning, tripled in size overnight. And we all went online. There were some people that wanted to go online with the school that had been online all the way through. And I managed it. I'm not the type of person that leaves, when you're in the middle of a storm. I don't do that. I stick things out. And we successfully got through the year. And then I really decided this is time for me to work from the outside in versus from the inside out. I mean, when you're in the public sector, there's bureaucracy and there's red tape that you have to work through. Whereas when you're working privately, you can kind of make strategic power moves. And I think my experience as in entrepreneurship, even though it was kind of minor and a side thing all the way along, it's really helped me see, because I did struggle in that. We didn't lay the right foundation. And I learned, I think, along the way, what needed to happen to have a more powerful impact right up front.
No, and I think that, that makes sense. And sometimes it is interesting. You have to almost get from the outside, and it's one where there's multiple things. And I'm not quite to the outside because I'm still in the law practice, but a lot of the things I even love to do with the legal practice and what we do with Miller IP law bugs a trend. And it doesn't really feel like it until I start talking with other attorneys and kind of explain how we do things and how we approach things and how we tackle them and why it makes sense to us. And then it's like, yeah, this really isn't the norm. And sometimes you have to kind of get outside of what people are used to make that difference. So it sounds like you kind of found that as well. And so now as you decide, okay, I'm going to make the leap, kind of make this a more full-time focus and go after that. How's it gone since then? I mean, certainly COVID has changed things, but I think that it's also exposed, some things that should have probably been available and being done beforehand, and it just kind of accelerated some of that. But how have things gone? Is it, gone well and it's been well adopted and accepted, or is still a struggle, or kind of where are things at today?
Um, it's gone extremely well. You're never gonna get in a position, I don't think, where you're void of struggle. That's part of this business, right? When you're doing new things and when you're an innovator and a trailblazer, you're gonna have to, you're gonna hit challenges, you're gonna have difficult times. But I think having building right and having the right mindset going in, and that's really kind of the core of what I'm doing with Theara. With Theara, we're lighting the way to well living for the neurodiverse and those who love them at home, at school, and at work. And I'm doing that by building curriculum, well, really online training that's very potent, easy to follow things that you can take away, to really help people reach their fullest potential, maximize the time that they have in their day. Use principles. We give guided principles. We use a lot of acronyms. I know everybody kind of, I feel like acronyms are overlooked sometimes because they're such incredible memory tools. And so I use a lot of acronyms. And one of the things that I've really incorporated is the BUILD acronym that we use at Theara, and that's be the bridge, not the barrier. Utilize your resources. And that was probably one of my greatest challenges, is I was doing the side hustle on my own. My husband and I would work together, but he was like my main point person versus inviting other really talented people onto our team and realizing that, with that, you're inviting creative solutions. That's the I in the build. So you're inviting new people, new members that have new ideas, and then listening intently to those people. That's the L. And then directing positively. Like, I think it's really important. We have a no negativity rule, and that's not to say that you're not going to meet those challenges. You are, but you always have to step back and say, okay, what's the golden nugget in this? Yes, this is a hardship, but it's also training for me. How can I take something away? What can I learn here? How can we do this better? So
I think
the
that
journey
definitely is a great approach. Now, one question I'd had that maybe you'll be able to shed a bit of insight. I mean, certainly there's been a large acceleration with COVID, right? A lot of online schooling, people are shut down, forced by necessity, and without getting into political overlays as to when things will change or when things will line up, I think is a bit of a crystal ball, and what state you're in probably overlays that as well. But within all of that uncertainty, but also opportunity, kind of with all of the change going around, where do you see things headed in the next, 6 to 12 months for you guys?
Well, I'm hoping so. The curriculum that that we're developing is for home, for parents at home, for early childcare workers. It's also for educators K-12. So it's guiding people through the academic journey and the parents of those students and teaching them how to most effectively collaborate together. And then we have Know the Way at Work, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion training that has a neurodiversity focus. And we also have a piece that's Emerge ND, which is how to emerge positively as a neurodiverse individual. People don't oftentimes wear a t-shirt that says I'm dyslexic. In fact, I just had a conversation with my son in the car, who's 12, and he's like, Mom, what's high school gonna look like for me? And I mean, literally it was this morning, and he had tears in his eyes thinking, because he's extremely intelligent, he's double exceptional. And he's like, I don't want to sit in a classroom with different kids. Well, that's the whole reason I'm doing Theara, is to change the landscape. And I think what has happened historically, or what I saw for many years, is kids who struggled in this way a lot of times felt insecure socially, and they would end up online. And it can be very isolating for kids online. I think they struggle more with issues like anxiety and depression when they're at home and they're just sitting with a screen and not getting that face-to-face encounter. So I think the best when it comes to education is a system where we're merging the best of our technologies and our in-person encounters with one another. And that's really what Theara is trying to capitalize on. How can we do this together most effectively? How can we build relationships in the most impactful way?
No, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity, and I don't know that it's easy or straightforward, because I think that to find that balance, and we do a lot with our firm of doing servicing businesses that are all across the US and trying to find that balance of personal touch and interaction and be able to establish a relationship. And that's where it's not even an everyday and ongoing thing. And it's still a ton of work to find that right balance. And so kudos to you guys, because I think that there's a lot of issues to address, but a lot of opportunity, and done right, it can certainly be very impactful. With that, as we start to reach towards the end of the podcast, if I always have two questions I ask at the end, so we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
I think worst business decision, and it's kind of counterintuitive, I guess, but it was just, I always dove right in and I didn't always lay the right foundation for that. And so I would end up scattered and stressed out and full of anxiety when we were hitting trouble zones. And I think that kind of leads right into probably, I think, what the best thing my biggest takeaway was. And the biggest takeaway is really building right. And that's, the acronym I was sharing before, which is be the bridge, utilize all your resources, invite creative solutions, listen intently, and direct things positively. So those are my best piece of advice in relationship to entrepreneurship.
No, and I think that definitely makes sense. And I think that's an easy mistake to learn or to make, but also a great one to learn from. So the second question I'll always ask is, if you're talking now to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I think the biggest piece of advice is get the right people on your team and don't be afraid of doing that. And I think take the time in the beginning to strategize and hopefully move forward in a way where you can afford to financially invest in those people. For me, I have a wonderful business consultant, Kamyar Shah, and he's been really helpful with me as far as moving forward and giving me those golden nuggets and those pieces of advice to build right in the very beginning and the structure that I need to have in place to start things right.
Awesome. Well, I think that's definitely a great takeaway. And I kind of like the idea of getting those pieces in place on the front end and getting that, setting it up for success can have a big impact on the business. So with that, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be a employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
The best way to contact me is at theara.com. That's THEARA.com. And we're also on social media, on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram as Theara Way, just WAY. So THEARWAY.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage. Oh, go ahead.
Yes. I should be available there. I've got a blog going and we're going back with people, and there's also an opportunity to subscribe to a monthly newsletter and an opportunity to donate. And we need all the donations we can, because I truly believe the neurodiverse are the innovators of our future. You have people like Elon Musk, people like Bill Gates, Steven Spielberg, they all are self-identified as neurodiverse, and they're world changers. And so I think we need to really capitalize on that competitive advantage.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I think that there's a lot of ways that we can help people to be able to learn the best way possible to have the most benefit, and otherwise set them up for success. So I think that's definitely a great takeaway. And I definitely encourage people to reach out, find out more. And whether you want to be a customer, employee, an investor, or just be Renee's next best friend, definitely a great opportunity. But with that, thank you again, Renee, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to leave us a review, subscribe, share, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome episodes. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. Well, thank you again, Renee, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Have a good one.
You too.